if I had enough wine, but I need a little bit more. But anyway, before I do the introduction, I do want to tell everybody that this is technically our last program. However, we do have an annual meeting at November 15th, and members and non-members are very much welcome to that. We'll have a very short meeting, and then we'll have a program. The program is with Kevin Doyle and Karen Renardi, and they do a very good presentation about the Mayflower. And so it's sort of seasonal in time for Thanksgiving. And then we'll probably have some wine and more, and either some chocolate. Well, I don't know, I'll ask you, would you rather have chocolate desserts or hors d'oeuvres type things like that? Chocolate, right? Yeah, that's what I think. Okay, unanimous. All right, that's what we'll do. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and those of you that have been with us all season, thank you very much for your support of Tales of Cape Cod. I love doing this, we all love doing this, and we love seeing you every week. So keep it up. Thanks. So Morgan James Peter, a.k.a. also known as, and I cannot pronounce it, Walim Defunky Professor is a multi-award-winning interdisciplinary artist, writer, and educator whose works span the mediums of music, theater, film, and literature. Born in Bronx, New York, and raised in both New York City and Mashpee, he is a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, a violist and pianist trained in jazz and classical. He performed at Carnegie Hall before the age of 14. And by 16 was one of the youngest session players in EMI Records history. A 3-time winner of the Urban Music Award for Jazz, 5-time winner of the Silver Arrow Award, and a top multi-category nominee for the Native American Music Awards. He received his formal training in theater from the New African Company in Boston. He went on to pursue a successful career as a playwright and director in New York City, and his plays and performance pieces have been presented throughout the United States, Canada, as well as the Caribbean and the UK. He's the author of 2 books, A Mixed Medicine Bag and Land of the Black Squirrels. You'll have to explain that for me. His music and books are all widely available online. He's a tenured professor of English, Communication, and Black Studies at UMass Dartmouth, where he's been since 2003. Now, the Grovolatos here, and they are Zig Peters. Ta-da.
Or the ZYG 808.
And Chuck Vermette, yeah. So they are a multi-Grammy-nominated soul funk ensemble and musical production team created by veteran touring and studio session players and singers, starting as a series of weekly jam sessions. With their danceable, as I proved, mix of feel-good soul and funk classics and originals, the group quickly rose as a regional favorite at bars, club events, and festivals throughout New England and New York City. A pioneering force in the South Coast thump and soul sound, the Grovolatos made their debut on Americana Indie Blues chart with the single Do You Mind at number 11, which proceeded to spend the next 41 weeks in the top 10, peaking at number 3. The 2017 release of their album, and I gotta say this, I gotta say it this way, Ask O Mama, as an innovative street corner concert tour, received 4 Grammy nominations for pop and R&B that year, and also earned 2 additional nominations in R&B and rock the following year. So, continuing as a regional ensemble, performing as well as recording and releasing music as the resident production team and session band at Polyphonic Studios, they are also a top-level musical think tank who can produce artists and bands in virtually any genre conceivable. And I bring you, ladies and gentlemen, the Grovolatos. I will dance my way back to my seat.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the group of those.
'Certain energy needs to be recognized and removed. Never do unto others what you will eventually have to undo. Following the year 1774, the following atrocities regularly took place in the very building that you're sitting in. It was a common practice for residents of the towns of Sandwich and Barnstable to file petitions in Barnstable Court claiming debts from Wampanoags living in the Mashpee territory. And it was a common practice for the court, without hearing the other side of the story, to place the children of said person in debt into indentured servitude until the age of 21, at which time they would be released with a cow, a Bible, a regular suit of clothes for the week, and a dress suit for the Sundays. These were the sentences handed out in this court on a regular basis, up until the opening of the boarding schools. Subsequent, when the courthouse moved, the tradition continued, as Mashpee children were regularly extracted from the Mashpee school and taken to the reform schools, which were children work farms, and this was a practice that continued until the 1970s. The energy has to be removed. Never do unto others what you will later have to undo. The number of times you see it's not acknowledged, the ship captains, the wealthy, those of Orleans and Chatham, were the captains of human cargo. There were occasions beyond Amistad where the human cargo would escape and would be marched into this courthouse in shackles to be returned to servitude. Never do unto others what they will later have you undo. We release this energy through telling truths, not always the happy tales. The stories that we're about to tell you are the traditions of jazz, but the traditions of jazz between that which you understand into the traditions of jazz that have been preserved by the invisible. I invoke the energy of Edwin Gordine, Jr., bass player and band leader extraordinaire, resident of Barnstable until he transitioned. I invoke the energy of James Harris, jazz drummer extraordinaire, resident of Barnstable until he transitioned. I invoke the energy of Edgar Toby, Jr., rock guitarist and Mashpee Wampanoag, resident of Mashpee and subsequently Barnstable until he transitioned. I invoke the energy of Mr. Sebastian Lewis Sr., jazz pianist of the Boston Circuit, summer resident of Mashpee, father of William Lewis, current resident of Mashpee Wampanoag tribal member. These are the invisible. I bring back the energy of a time when there were such places in Falmouth as the Plantation, such places in Mashpee as the Wigwam, such places in Mashpee as Joe Peace, such places in Barnstable as Joe's Twin Villas, such places in Barnstable as Slaves, such places in Barnstable as the Mill Hill Club, where the current residents of the Mill Hill probably partied the years back. That's a different story. I invoke the energy of Storyville. I invoke the energy of venues. see, there's a story of Cape Cod that goes back to a time of segregation, and unfortunately what desegregation did was turn the black hand side invisible. And we don't want to tell that story because it means recognizing the truth. Don't do unto others what you're later going to have to undo. The elders take you where they went. That's how I got to know everybody. That's how I got to know King Times. But the story gets a little bit deeper because I was lucky enough to get off of the peninsula. In fact, half my family's from the other side of the peninsula. So far from the other side of the peninsula that they actually immigrated from Barbados to New York City. And of course, anybody who's come to New York knows that New York is its own nation altogether. It's its own nationality. Well, the nation of New York City, in particular the Northeast Bronx. Now, the question was asked about the land of the black squirrels. If you've ever been to the Bronx, you know that it is the land of the black squirrels. Because the squirrels in the Bronx are indeed black. Dark fur, dark brown. It is the land of the black squirrels. By the way, I've spotted some up here, so apparently they moved also. This really is a good retirement for me. Is that everything changes. That is the true tradition of jazz. It's an empirical music. But when we talk about traditional jazz, we're talking about music that happened 60, 70, 80 years ago. We try to say that's the jazz tradition. Well, you see, that's because that's the jazz folks understand, because if you don't understand where jazz comes from, you don't know how it's going to move forward. Education that you can receive, musical education you can receive in school, is not going to come from the symphony, it's not going to come from the orchestra, it's going to come from the jazz band. Why? Well, I can tell you, somebody who's been trained in both forms. As a classical player, you learn to interpret. And that's it. When you're a jazz player, you learn to interpret, you learn to reinterpret. You're simultaneously a composer and an arranger, all at the exact same second that you pick up your instrument. Which means that you need to know your scales, you need to know your chords, you need to know sound. You need to know music theory so you know what your live is. Never once have I heard Mozart, as much as I love Mozart, I've never heard him superimpose a 12/8 over a 5/4, over a 4/4, over a 6/8, and actually make it work. Guess what? That was a hard assignment for me in 10th grade. Welcome to jazz. Big elements. Now, traditions. Traditions that we have to break. Let me explain something. Some of the traditions that we have to break. My grandfather, National Wampanoag, was actually the first Democratic candidate to win elected in the town of Nashville. He was just pre-FDR. Well, my grandfather used to tell my father to stay out of sandwich. My father used to tell me to stay out of sandwich. Guess what I have to tell my son? And he unfortunately found out why when he was in 7th grade and had to play a softball game in 7th. some of the traditions that we have to get rid of. Now, another little funny tradition. The same joke that they used to tell my grandfather, my son heard that very same room. Naturally, whoa, 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 whoa. But let me first explain, whoa, 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 is some racist shit that I got put that straight up. Because first of all, people had to do that because they were unable to regulate. So that's what the whole the other thing is, depending on how you regulate, depends on the message that you're sending. You could be offending somebody and not know it. Think about if the only things that you know in English are swear words. When somebody comes up to you, you decide, I'm going to practice my English on them. We'll be very happy with that, wouldn't you? You think the person has Rett syndrome or something going on, right? That's what it's like when you do that to a native. You're showing us how stupid you are. The jokes that have been made by Wampanoag people, and trust me, there are a whole bunch you've never heard. Stop validating. When you do that, and you're validating. You're creating, through your little joke, you're creating a deepening of the racial divide. Through a little joke. Trust me, the same people who make those jokes would never be able to stand the jokes that we can make back. Want to test me? Again, I grew up in the Bronx. Man of the street insult. And it has nothing to do with ethnicity. Some of the best cutters I know are from Eastern European extraction. Do you want to test my Bronx? Don't think so. All right. When we start our discussion on jazz, we think of our I'm sorry, you guys would probably know this sound better. It starts with a stride. Now, undeniably jazz, correct? Now, you're hearing that nice little bounce to it, right? Keep the bounce going. Now, the audience, you hear that. You feel that bounce, right? Now, when you're a jazz player, you're going to suddenly hear this. Keep the bounce going. 10 minutes before our set was ready to go over, we just started playing a nice little groove like this. On the way, everybody in the room, we have a bar, we have an area, you come to the dance floor, you have a big open section over to the outside. Well, we're on the inside playing. There's a group of guys sitting at the bar watching the game. And their wives, who were I think about 4 or 5 bottles of wine into the evening, were on the dance floor. And one in particular is kind of like grinding on our bass player at the time. Much respect to the soul of Christopher Redbone Sweetie, by the way, our departed bass player at the time. Well, so she's there grinding on Mr. Sweetie. And her husband suddenly comes running out from the bar and plants himself in between and is dancing down trying to block the door. And of course, I'm at the keyboard watching this. Do you mind if we dance with your date? Do you mind if we dance with your date? Do you mind? Probably in the wrong place. Oh, you ain't got no rhythm, but your girl likes to funk. That's an N, not a C. Oh, you ain't got no rhythm, but your girl likes to funk. One more time, that's an N, not a C. Oh, man can tell by the way she shakes her rump. Oh, do you mind if we dance with your date? Do you mind if we dance with your date? Do you mind? You're probably in the wrong place. Girl was on the dance floor on ladies' night. Oh, girls all over the dance floor on ladies' night. But don't you worry, we had a feeling all right. Oh, you won't believe the things your girl likes to do. You won't believe the things your girl likes to do. Probably gonna deny it, but we know it to be true. Oh, do you mind if we dance with your date? Do you mind if we dance with your date? If you mind, you're probably in the wrong place. To the left, 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 to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right now. Forward and back, backward and front. Now shimmy and boogie, and shimmy and boogie, and turn to your left, and then you shake your rump. Do you mind if we dance with your dates? Oh, do you mind if we dance with your dates? Do you mind? You're probably in the wrong place. Do you mind? You're probably in the wrong place. Do you mind? You're in the wrong place. One thing being a musician on Cape Cod, well, 2 things. You develop the hide of a rhinoceros and you also develop a sense of humor about things. Now, that little ditty became, there's a chart called the Indie Blues Chart, it's part of the Americana circuit. That stayed in the top 10 of the chart for 41 weeks. So, the guy who was worried about his wife running away with a geriatric bass player led to the writing of a hit record.
So the best ones always come.
Basically. Now, the tradition that sound comes out of, used to be a bar in Osterville called Joe's Twin Village. Now, if you know the history of Joe's Twin Villa and the development of Joe's Twin Villa from the days of a speakeasy to a bar, you also know that Joe's Twin Villa was one of those venues that, as a young musician, you could get your start in. Now, funny little thing, I was the Wednesday night guy at Joe's Twin Villa during the summer. And then there was a band that was the Sunday night band called West Side Soul. Now, I never bothered to go hear West Side Soul because when I heard who their piano player was, I'm like, they must suck. And found out, no, the band was really good, just the piano player sucked. But to tell you how things work in cycles, now, Joe's Twin Villa, now what we also have to look at is shifts in economy. Wonderful thing, civil rights movement, wonderful thing, integration. Bad thing, integration became a way to then say we don't need black and brown businesses anymore. Somehow, what we forgot about with integration was, you can come into our clubs and our restaurants, and we can go to your clubs and your restaurants, and you can stay at our hotels. That's what it was supposed to be. But instead, the belief became, well, no, because the problem is, with integration, we did not wipe out the concept of white supremacy and white superiority. So what integration meant was white was better. It was an unfortunate mind game. So therefore, a lot of the venues that used to bring diversity to the Cape, actual diversity to the Cape, ended up getting shut down. And this becomes now, what this leads to is bands like ours have to become entrepreneurs in the deepest sense because we don't get booked for venues. We actually have to create our own. I can tell you the bars, and you want to know the really funny thing that we get rejected on? Well, if you had more white guys in your band, maybe. I've actually been told that. I've been told that in Chatham. I've been told that in Yarmouth. I've been told that in Falmouth. And I've been told that with a straight face. So what happens is we learn how to promote our own shows. We learn how to book our own spaces. So it ends up building us up economically. This is why, as a band, we're able to evolve into becoming a recording studio. Because we had to learn how to. We become a promotion unit because we had to learn how to. All those nice little cars that you see there, had to learn Photoshop. That's one of the things that the other bands on Cape Cod don't have to do. One of the several things other bands on Cape Cod don't have to do. Now, here's the other funny thing. We ended up, when we came out with the album Ask Your Mom, we got copies of it, by the way, on sale tonight, $10, easy to find here because it's 50 every place else. Grab one now. But when we came out with Ask Your Mom in 2017, we got told by 4 venues, oh, your music isn't quality. So what we did was, okay, we got a record to promote. So stopped and thought about it. And I said, went and read every town ordinance and found out about what does it take to perform on the street. So the towns that required permits got permits. The towns that operate under free speech, we exercised free speech. And we literally did a street concert tour. And what we found out, by the way, accidentally was, you make more money with a bucket in front of you on the street than you make playing any bar on Cape Cod. In fact, we played across the street from a bar that we used to play in Provincetown. I won't say the name, but it's across the street from Town Hall. So we played in a bar that we used to play in front of in Town Hall. We set up in front of there at 6 o'clock, and we did it just to piss the owner off. So we got set up at 6 o'clock. You know, what I love about, by the way, Provincetown has the coolest police department I think I've ever encountered in life. I mean, when you talk about actual public servants and respect, courtesy, etc., unlike any place in the United States I've ever been. I have to say that about pizza. So we set up across the street, full Bugs Bunny obnoxious mode, because we even have generators, so we don't have to plug in anything. We have our own electricity. Self-sufficiency again. Set up there at 6 o'clock. By 8 o'clock, we were packing up, watching the band that was going on in there at 9 o'clock loading in. We made literally 4 times as much in 2 hours in front of the club on the street than we ever made playing in the club. So consequently, we very rarely, except for the wintertime, play bars on the Cape. Because that was a lesson we learned. But the other thing that we learned playing out on the street, from the street corner, people are buying your CD. We're selling lots of CDs. Little did we know people who were buying the CD were members of the Recording Academy. So the next thing we get is a letter in the mail telling us we've received 4 nominations for a Grammy on our album. So keeping it going. But again, it's sort of like, this is how Cape Cod's unconscious bias, I'll call it, can sometimes work against it. Because when we sweep things under the rug, you end up with a pile under the rug, and sometimes people want to find out what is that pile under the rug, and that's when they're going to see the dirt. So you disrespect a band from Cape Cod, and said band from Cape Cod gets Grammy nominations and then goes around the country telling the story how and why. And the story of what kind of environment we live in. Now enough of that, let me play y'all some more music. We're gonna give you the first one from the album. This one is called Ever So Close. Now, when COVID was an interesting time to open a recording studio, especially when you're a band and you're a band that all lives in the same house, and now you're under lockdown during COVID. And what you're actually seeing on stage are 5 different genres, because I'm coming out of jazz and soul music, and to be specific, New York jazz and soul, very much the roots. One of my piano teachers was Mr. Barry Harris. My grandfather, when he came to this country, originally as a classically trained pianist, his initial work was as a producer and band leader for Decca Records, subsequently for Southern Records, so he was part of the bill building tradition. So little bits and pieces of musical roots, like I said, session playing for EMI. So coming out of New York, which is more of a melange of different styles, because I grew up playing klezmer right along with jazz too, because that was the neighborhood I grew up in. My first time getting inebriated was actually at a bar mitzvah for one of my best friends. So, like I said, that was the community we grew up in. So you could imagine Cape Cod being a little bit more of a shock to your system. And of course, I guess the warning sign coming from New York in the summer, the warning should be the radio. Because when you're leaving New York, you have the radio stations like WBLS and Z100, so you have your pop stations, you have your R&B stations, and just when you get beyond New Haven, you begin to lose those stations. And it's really kind of funny because WBLS, which is an R&B station in New York, suddenly becomes a country station. Just when you get above New Haven. I mean, we want to talk about a shock to your system. As a kid, one minute you're listening to like the BT Express, and the next minute you're listening to Tammy Wynette. It's like, so that was like the warning, I guess, shot of what it was. And now The other little funny thing was everybody in my generation can tell you exactly what direction Southwest is. And you know why? Anybody want to take a wild guess why? Because if you lived on Cape Cod, your one shot per week to listen to anything related to R&B or hip hop was Sunday afternoon coming from Brown University, WBRU. And you had to have your antenna pointed specifically in that direction in order to get, I'm not kidding, you had to actually wave your radio antenna in that direction if that was what you wanted to hear. And you had to have a really nice stereo. So, you know, this was almost like people talk about in the 50s with the Ed Sullivan Show. Everybody would be in one person's house because that was the one person who had the TV. Well, this was the one person who had the really good stereo. So every Sunday, we're all at their house like, that's Cape Cod music. But with this situation, Mr. Burnett is actually a metal player.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, see, nobody threw anything at me.
Yeah.
But this is a rock heavy metal guy.
I could take the ponytail off.
But started playing jazz.
Yeah.
ZYG 808 is a hip hop guy. Hip hop EDM Afrobeat guy. Started out playing jazz. One of his teachers, who was the original drummer of the Groovalados, the late Mr. Eddie Ray Johnson, was a rock player, rock funk player. Started out jazz. The roots of what we play, that's the tradition. Being able to take jazz and take it in any direction. Now, where being jazz players help. The very first gig that the Groovalados ever played was at, well, actually, the first gig we actually played was for the Multicultural Festival at Cape Cod Community College. Then later that night, we played a bar in Falmouth called Grumpy's. Yeah, we played there. Anyway, at the time that we got the gig, we only knew 6 songs. And we had a 3-hour set. Well, when you're a jazz player, you know how to make a song last for half an hour. And nobody even knows that it's the same song until you go back into it. Because
Jazz musicians, the original DJs.
there you go. Because, let me give them, show you one. You start with. You're hearing 19 different songs, but it's just 19 different songs all played different, different ways. We love awkward stops. It's our own little amusement. You get the audience like. But so now, where the funny thing comes in is when you end up with the two traditions meeting. And where it becomes really funny is I remember we went to, there was a place in Hyannis, it's no longer there, called the Island Inn. It was a restaurant. Yeah. And they used to have jazz jam there. We were like, oh man, jazz jam, yeah. All of us, you know, all the Groovaladas, the ones who are now no longer with us, and the younger ones, we all went to the jazz jams. We're all like, jazz jam, yeah, jazz jam, yeah, jazz jam. And we get to the jazz jam, and the first thing that happens is the guy who's taking the name. So what's your name? Waleem. Waleem. And then he decides, you know, I'm going to use your real name. That's a better jazz name. What? I guess I'm wondering what would happen if Ahmad Jamal showed up. Or Lonnie Down. But anyway, it's sort of like, wow, that it runs that deep. That you got to change my name to put me on the list? Really? You're going to decide what a better jazz name is? Incidentally, I already won a bunch of jazz awards with J1. For some reason, all the jazz clubs that hired me in New York never once said to me, the Blue Note, the Village Gate, the Bitter End, the New Eurekan, Joe's Club, the Lennox Lounge before they closed it down, the Sugar Shack, none of that, the all clubs in Brooklyn, none of them ever, the 5 Spot, any of the clubs in Philly, DC, none of them ever said, wow, you have a lousy jazz name. The only place I ever heard that was Cape Cod. Now, another little funny thing about understand when the jazz traditions clash. There's a musician, he once played, when I was 17, I once had the pleasure of hearing him and his band at the Melody Tent. Some of you might have heard of him, his name is James Brown. In '85, James Brown and most of the members, the original members of the JVs, blew through hiatus. And I had a front row seat. And I was 17 years old, and one thing that I knew about James Brown's band was all of his musicians were either jazz players or they came from the historically black college marching bands. Because he loved discipline. Or the other place where you would get them is from the military bands. So I'm there in the front row with my real book tucked under my arm, and this was a life-changing concert, I have to tell you. For me, there's music before hearing James Brown live and after hearing James Brown live. And the thing that blew me away was not as much, James Brown, I have to say, it was incredible and electric. But what blew me away was the jazz concert that his band gave for an hour and a half before he even came out on the stage. That was the sort of like, for me, the moment. And the other wonderful thing was, after the concert, getting to talk to these gentlemen. Actually getting to talk to Maceo Parker. Actually getting to talk to St. Clair Pickney. Actually getting to talk to Haji Ahmad, another guy with a lousy jazz name. Yeah. and the thing with Haji Ahmad, now here's the other thing, the funny thing with Haji Ahmad. He saw I had a real book under my arm. He goes up into the bus and comes out and he said, you said you live in New York, right? Uh-huh. Okay, when you're back in New York, go here. And what he gave me was a flyer to a place called the Jazz Cultural Theater. And he said, you're going to go there on a Monday night, and there's a guy who does a workshop. His name is Barry Harris. And I've heard of Barry Harris. And he's like, hey, and I'm like, wait, Barry Harris? He's like, yeah, Barry Harris. He gives workshops on Monday night. And he said, and by the way, you only need to go once a month. Because in that one night, he's going to give you a month's worth of homework. And he lied, he gave me 2 months worth of homework. Barry Harris completely opened up jazz for me, opened up piano. The thing, and what was a wonderful thing was my grandfather was my original piano teacher, had just passed away. So within months of losing a piano teacher, gained another piano teacher. And this is sometimes how that tradition goes and how that expanse goes. But understanding one of the things that I also knew about the James Brown Band was, with them all being jazz players, there's a particular tune, some of you might know it. Well, James Brown's band heard this, and remember when I talked about superimposing rhythms in a different way? Well, he heard his band heard. He then said, what song do you guys want to play? And we said, Cold Sweat. And he said, well, what about a real jazz song? And I said, any tune that a real jazz musician plays is a real jazz tune. And, well, no, you know, I think and then, well, you know, wait a minute, the audience, they paying us? I mean, they're paying us, we'll play what they want, but we pay to get in, so we play what we want. They want to play something else, we play themselves. The conversation goes back and forth, but this becomes the interesting conversation about jazz on Cape Cod. What happens when you end up with the traditions of jazz that are coming out of the traditions and then revisiting? Do we leave room for that? And at what point do we stop dictating to somebody who's as much of an expert as we are? I won't say I'm more, but somebody who will say is as much of an expert as we are and comes from a different experience. When do we become open to that? Case in point, there's another musician has actually once passed stay on Cape Cod because he had to get in Nantucket. This other musician, some of you might have heard of him, his name is George Clinton. Has another little band called Parliament Funkadelic. Well, Parliament Funkadelic, like I said, skipped over Cape Cod. Skipped over Cape Cod altogether to go out and play Nantucket. Well, again, Parliament Funkadelic, if you don't know, stole most of the musicians from James Brown. Their entire horn section used to be James Brown's horn section. It was that kind of thing back and forth. Again, jazz players and funk players. But the question becomes, when do we stop dictating? Because we had a funk band on Cape Cod who tried to dictate to Bernie Worrell, who was George Clinton's keyboard player, how to play keyboard and what funk was. And they were a Cape Cod funk band. Let's let that resonate for a second. Cape Cod, fine, green, grounded funk. But nonetheless, I digress. When does Cape Cod open up to the traditions that we absorbed and actually absorb the traditions and not just the elements that we find pleasing? When do we allow actual growth? When do we allow the actual musical voices to expand? When do we only want to hear the songs of Little Walter when they're sung by Elvis Presley? Why do we only want to hear Motown when it's sung by the Beatles? Ask ourselves that. And it can go in both directions. Why do I only want to hear the Beatles when it's played by Earth, Wind, and Fire? Yes, I think I was 30 by the time I found out that I gotta get you back to the Beatles. And I'm guilty of the same thing because I think my son just a year or two found out that I Want to Hold Your Hand is not an Al Green song.
I was very disappointed.
It's when we can expand what we listen to, because here's another bit of music history. There was a club in New York City called CBGB's. Anybody familiar with CBGB's? CBGB's is the birthplace of punk rock. Well, I can happily say that I'm probably, well, I can't say I'm one of the few. I'm one of the main people whose name is graffitied in the bathroom of CBGB's. I'm a punk rock kid as well. It was all part of the culture of New York City. It was all, and the thing is, we can't, and when you come to a place where it divides, let's hit it with it. Again, now you have a song, you may wonder where I've been, search to find the love within. I came back to let you know, got
wrong with me? My melody from your love you sing. I came back to let you know. Gotta thank you, and I can't let you know. And I was ready. Let's people up. Let them lock into that groove for a second, right?
Really thought that Bobby Caldwell and the Stooges wrote the same song. We're all singing the same song. That's, I think, the big point that I'm trying to make. We're singing the same song that will allow our stupidity to divide us. And on Cape Cod, we need to stop letting that stupidity divide us. There's no reason why we can't all play the same stage. There's no reason why I should feel the need to dictate to somebody else how to play their music. I should just appreciate it because it's not the music I'm playing. That's how I grow. That's how we all grow musically. The musicians that you see up here, when it was mentioned in the bio that we can produce every genre, is because all of us, between the three of us, we literally appreciate every single genre. How many bagpipe music fans do we have? Other bagpipe music fans do we have in the room? Here we go. One of my bucket lists is to learn to play the bagpipes. I've loved the bagpipes since I was a child. Now, it could possibly be genetic because I do have ancestors from Glasgow, Scotland. They were the ones who, some of the people who came through the Barbados Strait. But that's what needs to happen. Break the walls down. Like I said, don't do unto others what you're eventually going to have to undo. Well, this is the stuff we have to undo. When we have jazz, it needs to be jazz in all its forms. We shouldn't have to go like there's a festival, we unfortunately miss it. Well, not completely unfortunately. Every year that it's happened, we've been part of a festival called the Boston Jazz Fest. And the slogan of the Jazz Fest is jazz in all of its forms. And what's one of the wonderful and amazing things with it. But why we ended up missing it this summer was that was his first day of college. So we had to go to Vermont the day of the Boston Jazz Fest. But music in all of its forms. Now, when I go back to talking about George Clinton and about the universal elements of music, now, everybody here has heard of a gentleman named Johann Sebastian Bach, correct? Yes. Well, Johann Sebastian Bach has a style fugue, which is basically a bunch of arpeggios, pretty much. But there's an interesting characteristic to Johann Sebastian Bach that I actually somewhat proved when this young man was in utero.
Tell them the story.
Now, one of the funny things that they always say when they say when a child's in utero, you play music for them. Now, they specifically said you play Mozart and you play Bach.
Now, as a musician, I knew that the stimulating elements of Johann Sebastian Bach are identical to the stimulating elements of Parliament Funkadelic. Because a fugue is funk. Debate me on that. It's basically funk.
Should we play something for that?
Yeah, let's do a little something. So you have, now let's drop off. The big difference is where the beat drops, right? So that's a fugue. So my poor ex-wife, on one or two occasions, woke up to headphones on her belly. And what of course is playing on the headphones. By the way, that's not why she became my ex-wife. But nonetheless, it was recognizing those elements and also recognizing the same elements that you find in Mozart are the same elements that you find, believe it or not, in Count Basie, and you find in Duke Ellington. They're identical. The stimulating points and the stimulating elements. What are the differences? The cultural cultural nuances that we apply to it, the values and the devaluation that we place on it. But the bottom line is, let's all just keep playing the same song and listen to each other's song. With George Clinton, there was an interesting thing. George Clinton retired from music to some extent, but what he did before he retired was he blessed musicians from around the world. Well, there's one musician by the name of Daniel Abarabian. I cannot even pronounce his last name. But as you can tell from the last name, he's Armenian. How you know that is because if you're Armenian, your last name rhymes with Armenian. That's something and that's not stupidity, that's something that actually an Armenian person told me. If their last name sounds like Armenian, it means that they're Armenian.
Oh, is that Baytarian?
Peter Baytarian, yes, my old roommate in college. Peter Baytarian explained this to us. So this guy, Danny, is a keyboard player, and he's part of the Funkadelic Army, as they call it. So we actually opened for them one time, and I'm like, okay, let's hear what this guy's doing. So we're hearing the funk playing. Paradise over peace. Out of the blue, out of my mind, as the universe came into my life. So here we are, like the answer to a prayer. Come into my space, like a breath of fresh air. Nothing is perfect, but you are right for me. Now that we're here, what I see, given a choice between paradise and me, I choose paradise. That's why I'm with you. Paradise over me. Paradise over me. Given a choice between paradise and I choose paradise. That's why I'm with you. Paradise over me. Paradise over me. Long sunny days, been down the road. I'm resting on mine as we paddle along. Joy in your breath, our souls are ready. Alone together, memories left in the breeze. Nothing is perfect, but you are right for me. Now here we are. This is what I see. Given a choice between paradise and me, I choose paradise. That's why I'm with you. Paradise over me. Paradise over me. Yeah. Paradise over me. Paradise over me. Now, if we close y'all with a dance record, that means y'all got to stand up and actually dance. Or we could close with a concert piece. Your choice. Yes. Let's fit the rather stiff mood of the people sitting in here. So that means y'all gotta stand up, sorry. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, it is. It's the courthouse benches. I got you. I'll tell you what, everybody stand over and you can get in the aisles and stuff. There's even room over here. Let's have a dance record. Go ahead. Gotta give it this one. So the name of this one is It's Just Is. God, we have to ask you a number.